Welcome back to the Lifestyle Overland story. This morning, I am pinching myself to make sure it's not a dream. Yep, I am really in Scotland, and I'm drinking real coffee with my good friends before heading on our way to a special event. But even with all this beautiful sunshine, we had some troubles brewing on the proverbial horizon. A cursory morning inspection identified that a slight leak on the master cylinder was getting worse. So we're attempting to head it off before the next leg of our journey by snugging up a few connections. So I got maybe a 1/16 of a turn, about 2 mil. That one's really, let's see if I can get 1 more mil on it. I don't want to force it too much, but so let's dry that really well and just watch it for the next few minutes. That's the hard part about some of these rigs that we have that sit and go on a trip and then sit. There's something about the expansion and contraction that kind of irritates stuff like this. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Scotland. I feel like I should do that differently though. Let's try hello lasses and laddies, welcome to Scotland. That's probably terrible. I apologize to all my Scotland friends. This has already been a spectacular trip. Marge and Tim Lunn invited me to come out and explore Scotland with them. So there's a thing called Classic Cruise that we're headed to today. We're going to be joining up with some other Land Cruiser enthusiasts. We've been granted special permission to explore a private estate. So we'll be driving trails that very few people get the opportunity to see. So learning to drive on the wrong side of the road has been quite interesting. But thankfully, the beast has already trained me to drive right-hand drive vehicles. So I've been granted the keys to this beautiful 70 series, and we put about 6.5, 7 hours of drive time under the wheels yesterday. A bit nerve-wracking at times, but it was good to be able to follow them in their 40 series. This is known as Mustard. Freshly rebuilt engine underneath the hood, so this has been a really good shakedown for this thing. I'm looking forward to getting on the trails and seeing what camping and overlanding in the UK is all about. So right along. Check 1, 2.
Yep, receiving over.
Sounds good. After a mile or two of driving, Tim and Marge pulled off to check on the leak status before we got too serious about the day's travels. I'll see if you can guess by the looks on our faces if our day was getting any better. Apparently, there was a breakdown on the interior of the brake pressure warning sensor that was letting brake fluid weep out the bottom. What started as just a bit of wetness at the beginning of the trip was now steadily draining the fluid reservoir with every stop. All part of the adventure. Well, let's think about this. Not here. It's in that seam there. While Tim got on the horn to try and get some parts on the way to the event, I set to coming up with a way to stem the tide and limp us the rest of the way there. Plan A was to try and use some Araldite epoxy, which is similar to our American JB weld. Hopefully this wasn't a high pressure leak and we could block off the seepage long enough to find a replacement sensor. Now, we just needed to sit back and wait for the resin to set up properly before we gave it a pressure test. Thankfully, Marge, who was keeping abreast of the situation, had found a coffee stand with just what we needed to help pass the time. Alright, the repair continues. The JB weld is almost set up, but Marge has found us a little treat while we wait. So, explain to me what we've got here.
So we have some coffee, we have 2 Americanos for the boys, and this is a flat white for me, and this one is for Sarah.
In spirit.
Yeah, so don't worry, it will still be in there when it gets across the Atlantic, and it's...
Oh, wow.
So it's heather and wild berries, and it's a nice candle smell.
Nice. We got you something, Sarah.
And then, just to keep the hunger at bay, in here, what's called an Empire biscuit. So it is shortbread with raspberry jam in the middle and icing on the top, and then a little jelly tot. You only get them in Scotland.
Only in Scotland.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like I'm having a prank played on me as well. Because if I was in the States, this would be called a tea biscuit. Oh my. Look, there's stuff inside. After sipping our coffee and nibbling our Empire biscuits for the required setup time, there was only one thing left to do. Cross our fingers and hope our patch job held up. Oh, stop. As it turns out, the sensor was completely failing and let far too much pressure blow out the epoxy. What do we say? Ach. Ach, at the lock. Dang it. That was a good try. Does it look similar? Actually, just stick your finger in this when this is ready. So, we resorted to plan B. Try to find a bolt that matched the threads as a plug. Oh, no. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the spare hardware bin that was even close, so we had to move on to plan C. This time around, we're going to try and plug the sensor from the top and let the pressure work for us by plugging the sensor port with some sealant and a chunk of gasket that happened to fit perfectly. Bit of an unorthodox fix, but we'll see. Ready? Ready, go. Once again, we crossed our fingers and gave the brake pedal a few good stomps to find that our patch job was holding, and we were back in business. After a quick parking lot test to make sure we didn't get any air in the system and mark on the reservoir to monitor fluid levels, we were finally on our way again. I just love it when a good roadside repair works out. Whatever it takes.
Those things from me you stole. You know me, I cashed out long ago, out of any bar control. Careful with the highlight reels we post. Half of it's the truth and half we've sold. The truth we've halfway told.
With our wee debacle sorted on mustard, it was time to turn our attention to the beauty of the Highlands as we wound our way over the grass-covered mountains, through whitewashed villages, and alongside glassy lochs. For me, this drive wasn't just about a tourist experience in a beautiful new country. This hit so much harder now that I was driving through the land of my ancestors. Ever since stumbling across another McCuiston's legacy in the Yukon Territory of Canada 6 years ago, when I found that Jack McCuiston was considered the father of the Yukon, I've been infatuated with tracing my family's history back to its roots. I come from Clan Uiston, or Uishton as we are called, which was a sept of Clan Donald, which means that I was now entering the easternmost edges of their once vast territory. These lands were once held by clan chiefs who operated more like independent kings in those days, with power and influence that rivaled even the Scottish kings. Being one of the largest clans in Scotland's history with a rebellious streak against anyone who had forced them into fealty meant things weren't always as peaceful as they appear now. As we drove further into their historical lands, it was surreal to imagine what life would have been like here hundreds of years ago at the peak of the MacDonald's dynasty. Little did I know that this connection to my clan would be more a part of this adventure than I ever dreamed, but more on that connection later. After a long but rewarding day of travel, we arrived on the shores of a beautiful loch where our fellow Land Cruiser friends had pitched base camp for the classic cruise event. As we were picking out a camp spot, we met the event organizer and true Land Cruiser fanatic, Ali Loader, along with the laird of the estate, who had graciously opened up his private land to our group's event, which is a rare exception here in Scotland. With introductions complete and our stomachs reminding us that we had totally skipped lunch to fix Mustard's brakes, we began setting up camp while the sun set over the loch. It all made for a magical moment as I soaked in the reality of where I was and the palpable sense of connection to this land.
Too easy. Somebody did teach me.
This would be my second night in a swag for this trip, and I have to say, it's actually quite nice even for my 6'3" frame. Oh, that's just over 190 centimeters for my UK friends. You just have to remember to grab your next day's clothes the night before and do a bit of wiggling to change. But I'm looking to add one of these to my own kit for simple solo trips or when we have a guest of our own.
I've come to find out here on the road so many men with talent, only a few have the soul. As I'm looking at my face in the water, I'm wondering if I am alone. Maybe I'm no better than the man who pays $1 for a fish. Maybe I'm no different than the ones who are running all of this. Well, I'm just searching for a peace of mind, and I'm just a traveler passing through for time.
Now it was time to cook up a proper meal. And seeing how Tim and Marge are well acquainted with my favorite food groups, they were well prepared for a celebratory supper in lifestyle Overland style with some delicious steaks. Not only had they chosen the perfect fare, but Tim actually passed the sacred torch of barbecue responsibility to myself. And while it's been a very long time since I've cooked over coals, I think we ended up with some of the tastiest steaks I've ever had. Although that could be the seasoning of a beautiful location and good friends enhancing the whole experience. With our ravenous appetite satisfied, it was time to join everyone around the campfire for a wee dram. As I sat listening to the chatter of multiple conversations and so many interesting accents from different corners of the world, this boy from Tennessee was overwhelmed with gratitude and maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome as I listened to story after story around the fire. Who would have ever thought that I'd end up here on the shores of a loch in Scotland and be a part of such a special gathering of like-minded travelers?
What's that? Well, that's black pudding.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is black pudding?
I guess a lot of the cuts that you meat you probably wouldn't eat necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the blood. I think they also call it blood sausage.
Blood sausage.
Yeah.
All right. After a delicious breakfast, oh, and by the way, I did enjoy the black pudding, Paul with West Coast Off-Road came to the rescue for Mustard's questionable patch job with a proper plug to replace the sensor. After a few field trials, it looked like we would be in business for some trails. With everyone rounded up and ready to roll, Allie gave us a briefing on what to expect for the day along with some reminders to respect the lands we've been given special access to. With everyone on the same page, there was nothing left to do but head off into the Highlands and see what the day held.
slippier than I thought. Yeah, thanks. Was you in 2 or 4 then? 4.
Higher and higher we climbed into the hills with our legendary steeds growling steadily along as the aroma of diesel smoke filled our senses alongside the pungent smell of wet earth and grass. Now, I've traveled a lot of miles and seen some beautiful places in all our years of adventures, but here, with the land falling away into the valleys below, revealing Scotland through the mist, I knew this moment would forever be etched to my mind, not only for its stunning beauty, but because somewhere inside, I strangely felt as if I had come home. I know it sounds odd, and I can't quite put it all into words. All I do know is that something like this was playing in my head as we neared the summit of our trail. Well, I'm a bit at loss for words for this one. Such an incredible country. You know, in a strange way, it feels a lot like coming home. Knowing that my ancestors lived here as well, just kind of beginning to touch on their footsteps.
can see why they loved it so much. What a place. What a place. Gorgeous. And peaceful.
Cold.